enough to simply average all the temperature records we have together. One must carefully account for the
We know that the Earth is warming, but you might have questions, like how did scientists figure out that this warming is happening and that it's caused by humans? How strong is the evidence really? What risks can we expect and what can we do about them? Climate science is not a new field. By the time of the American Civil War, scientists understood that the Earth is kept warm by a handful of gases that make up less than 1% of our atmosphere, but that these gases keep the sun's radiation from being immediately lost to outer space. And they understood that if humans were to change the amount of these gases in our atmosphere, our climate would be transformed. Today, these predictions are coming to life. And as global temperatures rise and extreme weather intensifies, you probably have more questions. The online primer, Climate Science, Risk and Solutions from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, is our effort to bring the story of climate science to everyone who wants to learn. Used in universities and high schools around the world, this primer answers how scientists know what they know about climate change. It takes learners through the history of climate science, the risks we face now and will face in the future, and the options we have to overcome climate change and secure a safe and prosperous planet for ourselves and for future generations. To do this, we worked with MIT's Professor Carrie Emanuel, an acclaimed climate communicator who has been studying the Earth's weather system for over 40 years. So let's let him share a peek at what you'll learn in Climate Science, Risk and Solutions from MIT.
Human-caused climate change began with the Industrial Revolution, when people began burning large quantities of coal and oil, releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And although scientists have long predicted that this influx of CO2 would raise the Earth's temperature, now that we can see it happening, a very reasonable question people ask is, how can we trace these trends all the way back to the dawn of the fossil fuel age? Surely that's too long ago for us to have accurate records of world temperatures, let alone how much carbon dioxide was in the air. In fact, by the 19th century, people were using thermometers and keeping careful records of temperature in enough places around the globe for us to reconstruct average world temperatures. Naturally, most of these measurements were taken at land-based stations, but some came from the ocean surface too. This is crucial data when trying to learn the Earth's average surface temperature, since of course the oceans take up most of the world's surface. It's not enough to simply average all the temperature records we have together. One must carefully account for the uneven distribution of temperature measurements around the world, the way growing cities have become warmer than the surrounding countryside, and many other variables. But one way to know if our calculations are good is to see if different groups, working independently of each other, have reached the same conclusions. And indeed, the 5 major groups tracking global temperatures have produced very similar records, discovering the same ups and downs from year to year. Since the 1960s, we have been able to add satellite measurements of infrared radiation at the Earth's surface to our arsenal of instruments. And it is reassuring to see that these, too, track closely with the thermometer record from around the world. But what about carbon dioxide? How can we really know the temperature rise traced by all these different sources is caused by rising CO2 levels? Indeed, it was not until the 1950s that scientists began measuring the CO2 content of the atmosphere directly. For climate scientists, it's not enough to know that CO2 levels have been rising since the 1950s. We want to return to the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And our greatest asset here is ice taken from Greenland and Antarctica. As snow falls in these frigid parts of the world, it traps small samples of air along with it. Because the snow never melts, over time it becomes compressed in layers of ice, with tiny bubbles inside that preserve ancient air. This record of air samples goes back hundreds of thousands of years. By drilling into the ice and collecting cores, scientists can create a year-by-year record of our past atmosphere. And it is these ice core samples that show us the history of CO2 in the atmosphere, which we now know held steady at around 280 parts per million for almost all of recorded human history until it began to creep up in the 19th century and truly take off in the mid-20th, to the point that the CO2 content of the atmosphere is fully 50% higher than it was 150 years ago. From these combined records, we can now see plainly what climate scientists have predicted all along. CO2 levels have been rising as we burn fossil fuels, and temperatures have been rising with them.
The pace of climate science has never been faster, which is why MIT's Climate Science Risk and Solutions has been newly updated for 2024 with the latest data and scientific consensus. And with help from MIT Open Learning, all this information has been paired with fun online learning techniques where you can watch, listen to, and play with the data. All of this is connected to other learning resources from MIT that will help you drill deeper into the topics that interest you the most, whether that's the basic science of the greenhouse effect, the climate models that help scientists peer into our future climate, or the solutions at hand, from renewable energy to carbon capture. Are you ready to have your questions answered about climate change and climate science? Then visit climateprimer.mit.edu to begin.
This program is underwritten by Sustainable Settings, a nonprofit organization devoted to harvesting nature's intelligence in its research and demonstration of sustainable human settlement. Sustainable Settings is supported by volunteering, the sale of our organic farm products, and your tax-deductible donation. Call 970-963-6107 and visit us on the web at www.sustainablesettings.org.
On the way down here, we talked about creating order in things, or encouraging, co-creating, I think is a better way to put it, a sense of order as it has to do with rain and moisture, and I found that fascinating, and I'd love to share that with the viewers.
Well, you look at what happens in nature. Now, I live about 2 hours from Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta, Georgia has a historical record that it is 20% more likely to rain on Saturday or Sunday or both than to rain on any of the weekdays. But any of the weekdays, people are out on the highways going to work or coming home from work right at the sunrise, sunset rhythm of the day.
Inhale, exhale.
Well, they're exhaling petroleum,
Carbon.
yeah, oily stuff.
Yeah.
And that's going off in a cloud, and this is chaos, you know, molecular motion at random.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going off in a cloud above the highways that ring Atlanta and feed Atlanta.
Okay.
And that happens in the morning, and it happens again in the evening.
Okay, so there's 5 days of that in
Yeah.
the commute.
Yeah, and then on your barbecue, it's liable to rain.
Okay, on the weekends. And
Yeah.
so where are you going with that?
Well, we're capable enough of stopping the rain. We can keep it from raining. We're doing a pretty good job of that.
So we're doing by the weekly inputs and the driving. You're saying we're holding rain back, or somehow.
Well, we're turning the particulate matter in the atmosphere. We're coating it with oily substances.
Emissions.
Yeah, emissions.
Okay, and so
Yeah.
on the weekend, what happens?
There's not as much of that at all. There's sort of a breath of fresh air.
So it builds up in a way during the week, is what you're getting at.
Right, right. I mean, the Weather Service explained this in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, that this was because the particulate matter in the atmosphere built up through the week. Now, in a sense, this is correct. It did build up through the week. But then it would rain on Saturday and Sunday.
Why?
Why Saturday and Sunday, see?
Yeah.
So they were saying that it rained on Saturday and Sunday because it had built up too much during the week. But how come it didn't rain on Fridays or Thursdays?
Mm-hmm. And reached some kind of threshold where it broke.
Yeah,
Okay.
you might have thought it might do a little bit more of that.
Okay, so.
But the observation, like, I'm not talking about weather prediction. This is weather observation, which is a pretty exact science.
Okay. So what's happening?
Well, we're actually creating, and you can see it. You can come into Atlanta.
Like the inversion layers, that
Yeah,
thing?
you can see this sort of dome of haze, and this is
Yeah.
a common phenomenon around a lot of cities.
Yeah.
And in those kinds of hazy conditions like that, you don't get cloud formation. If you were a buzzard, you'd steer clear of there.
Okay, wait now. So it's disorganization,
Oh, sure enough.
right?
Yeah.
It's chaos,
That's right. It's chaos.
right?
Yeah, you're creating chaos
And for it to
in
rain-
that pollution.
For it to rain, it takes organization.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You know, I mean, what is the raindrop? It has coalesced, and the moisture in the atmosphere has built it up, and it hits the earth. In other words, the moisture in the atmosphere is organized.
Mm.
The rain process is a process of organizing moisture in the atmosphere.
Okay. All right. Now, let's take that and imagine that, you know, we haven't had rain for a month out here, right? We're high and dry
Okay?
here in the Rockies, and so, 17 to 20 inches of rain is our annual precipitation if you take it across the year. So let's just say it's been 30, 40, 60 days, and maybe we want to encourage, if we could, for it to rain. Is there a way to do that?
Oh, sure.
Help us out. Help us out.
Well, it helps to see what's going on.
Okay.
So observation, really, that's the basis of intelligence.
Okay.
So,
Make it rain, Hugh.
well, yeah, but I'm just saying you got to see what's going on if you're going to do
All
this.
right. All right.
You know, because really, if you work with nature, then things work. You know, because nature does the work.
Yeah.
If you work counter to nature, then it's expensive.
Well, as we know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really costly.
So we mine nature and abuse it to try to correct our disconnection,
We
basically.
sure have a curious way to treat nature.
Yeah.
Uh,
All right, let's make it rain. Help us go
okay,
there.
well, okay. In your little spot on Earth,
Okay.
like within the boundaries of your property,
Yeah.
you have got an entitlement to affect that area the way you want.
My eye. You mean? Is that my
Yeah.
responsibility?
Yeah, you can go out there and spray it with poisons.
Well, that's
mean-
legal.
That's legal, yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but it's legal. You could do that if you wanted.
I get it.
Not that you particularly might want to.
No.
Seems like a pretty crazy thing to do.
Pretty normal, unfortunately.
Well, I don't know, man. These salesmen, they could.
Let's not go there. So let's work on our will or our responsibility on a place and go from there.
Okay, so you can deal with your area. Now, if you identify its boundaries, you can go to Google Earth and take a picture of it, satellite picture,
Right.
and draw your boundaries all the way around your property. And you've got a map with the boundaries of your property drawn on it. And you've got a legal right to do what you want to do within that property. So if you want to sprinkle it with pixie dust, it's your right to do that.
That's right.
So
You might get a few looks from the neighbors, but who cares?
well,
The county or the state or the feds aren't going to bother you with pixie
No.
dust.
no, they're not going to bother your neighbor if he sprays this god-awful chemical, whatever it is,
Yeah.
without taking regard to his own self-protection.
Yeah. We call
You know,
that.
if he does it without a spacesuit on, then he shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. We call that chemical trespass.
Well, he's trespassing himself if he doesn't wear a spacesuit to do it.
All right. So so we've got the land, we've got the plat. We've identified it on Google Earth,
Yeah.
and we want it to rain. We need moisture of some kind. It could be dew or it could be something else, but we need to break this drought.
Well, this is the thing. Everything you do needs to be consistent with that aim.
Okay.
So it wouldn't matter, whether where you graze your cows influences things. Your land management makes a big difference in the health and vitality of your farm. And it becomes real noticeable when you start to take notice of it.
Mm-hmm.
It'll change the way you go about it. See, with these preparations, you can really have an influence on what's working on your farm. And two of the biggest things are silicon and nitrogen. They're like opposites of each other. See, carbon and silicon are nonpolar, and nitrogen is, well, it's the first anion in the periodic table, and it is extremely sensitive.
So when there's moisture in the atmosphere, but it isn't raining, is that order or disorder, or what is that? It's just a different order?
Well, okay, the moisture in the atmosphere, if it were organized, it would make puffy clouds, and the stronger the organization would be based on the strength of the boundaries of the clouds. So when you see clouds that have got very, definite boundaries.
Like nimbus.
Well, I suppose the biggest ones are your cumulus clouds.
Cumulus.
And they can be columns. And the
So
organization
they're creating intense order.
an intensity, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So intense that the water will crystallize inside of them. And then you might have a hailstorm.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like that sort of cloud is really sucking. And it's so powerful you don't want to go anywhere near it in an airplane. Certainly not in a light airplane.
No, I flew with my dad, and we navigated around those.
You bet.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So basically, you're not really aiming at the organization becoming so violent as that
Okay.
you get a hailstorm.
Okay.
If the organization like doesn't have to struggle so much to become concentrated, as it will become concentrated. But if you've got a lot of scattered clouds that are raining throughout the day, then it's a different kind of rainfall.
So, on our places, can we somehow influence the order that we're talking about to actually encourage rain and or dew or moisture?
Well, you want to connect in with what's happening in nature. And the truth of the matter is, you don't know a fraction of it hardly.
No. Correct. I know nothing every day I wake up.
Well, it's it's helpful to know that you don't know.
Yeah.
That's a big start.
Good humble point to start the day with.
Yeah. But basically, what I do as a general practice is I frame this in the intent that goes like this: if it be thy will, let the powers of nature converge to increase and enhance beneficial energies and to transform any detrimental energies into beneficial ones within the boundaries as marked, for now and in the future, for as long as is appropriate, because that gives you fourth dimensional boundaries. And in deep gratitude, because nature responds to gratitude as a feeling.
Acknowledgement and
Yeah,
gratitude.
It's like nature then is in love with you and responds to that vibration, you might say.
When I try to explain what we're doing, I ask people if they've ever been in love and shared between another person that intense exchange. And then once they grasp that and acknowledge that, yes, I've been in love, I say, well, when you direct that to another person, it's a powerful thing. But when you direct that to plants or animals or to your place or to the air even or whatever, it matters. It has an effect. That too spooky?
No, that's dead on.
Okay.
And I reckon that's what we mean in quantum physics, that you find what you look for. It's just a fact that what you are looking for
You find.
is what you're going to find.
Okay.
And that translates in a farmer's world into manage for what you want. Don't try to manage what you don't want.
Mm-hmm.
You
Okay.
know, if you find yourself focusing your attention on those things that you don't want, then you're having what you don't want.
So let's get back to
So you've
drought.
got to figure out what it's going to take to focus your intention on what you want.
Okay, so let's go there for drought.
Yeah. So if you're thinking drought, think of the bigger picture around you, because that informs your personal picture.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things that in a drought that's like a general drought in your area, there's a lot of things going on. You're only one part of that picture.
Okay.
But if you, by the things that you do in managing your property, for instance, letting your hayfield go to seed, because that's the natural time to make the best seed, if you have got enough fertility in the soil to feed that, then you'll make the best seed in a dry year. Because the seed is like the recrystallization of the plant.
Mm-hmm.
And that proceeds the best under those warmth and light conditions.
So all of those stewardship practices are the foundation of making or encouraging order. That's where you're going?
Yeah, but you know you're looking for rain.
Okay.
But you don't know how much rain is really beneficial for you.
Okay.
And how much you might be turning your back on opportunity as well. So it's like you don't want to be attached. You want to have a sense of humor about this.
Okay.
You know? That sense of humor is enormously important, because then you're managing for what you want.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in a drought, you manage for the drought. And if your place is a little bit more organized than the ones around it, then it will be the nucleus of breaking the drought. Because it's the seed of the new pattern, which is not a drought. So you do those things during that drought, that would be the best practices for drought.
Mm-hmm. You spoke of the preparations, but also the rhythms of when to apply them, and also the lunar or monthly rhythms that you would tie together to time your application to encourage the creation of the order. And go there.
Yeah, well, I had traveled up from the southeast Queensland area, north of Brisbane. I had traveled up into the far north on the Atherton Tablelands and along the coast in Tully and Innisfail and whatnot. And I'd been gone for a couple of months. And when I came back, Graham Sate, who had a farm there in Kenilworth in his area, he was in the middle of a drought. And he said, Hugh Lovell, he said, didn't you say you knew how to make rain? And he said, he explained to me that the condition they were in the drought. And I took my pendulum out of my pocket and I asked, how long will it take to break the drought? And the answer I got was that the drought wouldn't break for another 2 weeks until full moon. That nothing I could do would get it to break in that period of time.
Oh.
But I could get it to rain right after that, right at the full moon, then I could set it up to rain, which is what I did. And it rained. The drought broke with that. And I did a procedure using a map of his place with the boundaries drawn on it, and using radionic gear to transfer the pattern, because the map is a sort of a holographic connection with the actual property.
Mm-hmm.
And so with quantum entanglement, then the property is entangled with the map. So if I'm projecting a pattern of energy on that map, and that pattern of energy was the horn manure or the horn silica or both, or even including the horn clay, that I could broadcast all of those patterns to the map, and the map, by its entanglement with the field itself, it would connect those preparation patterns to the land. And this took morning and evening applications. So the way to start off with this is on the afternoon side of things, when the dew is ready to fall. So that's a natural cycle, so that at that time the forces that condense the moisture in the atmosphere are strongest.
So you would stir that and apply that to encourage the organization.
Yes. Now, if I use this preparation without the stirring, then it could be much more convenient.
Oh, that's the radionic.
So that was why using the radionics to do this.
Folks are going to have to look up radionics, but
Yeah,
I don't
in my book
I don't want
we've
to
got
throw us
some of
off
that.
into that. So, so what about in the morning then?
Well, so you put this pattern of the horn manure out in the evening, about the time the dew is ready to settle. And then in the morning, there is also, just before sunrise, there is a second sort of condensation of the moisture in the atmosphere and a dew fall. And then when the sun comes up, that burns off.
Or is absorbed too.
Or is absorbed,
Yeah.
depending on what's there and what can gather it in. Because there are certain types of plants, like the Fuller's teasel, that collects moisture in cups around its stem.
Mm-hmm.
But there's various strategies. And I was describing to you one I saw was a plant we called flatweed. Looks like a dandelion, and it is thriving in the middle of a drought where it hadn't rained for over 6 months. And it was merrily making blossoms and seeds, and as green as green.
So this plant had evolved to understand when it could harvest the dew on both sides of the day to grow. Would you say that?
Yeah. Well, the way it worked, I clipped one off with my shovel, and I did it right at the surface because the ground was so hard that I couldn't get the shovel in. But I popped it off right under its leaf whorl and flipped it over, and it had slugs living in the leaf whorl.
Slugs.
Slugs, slimy, moist creatures without a shell.
They're usually
They're like snails.
They operate in a very moist environment typically.
Oh yeah, well, it was a moist environment around this plant's root.
In parched desert.
It was, no, it was scorched really dry.
Yeah.
What we call Bermuda grass in the States, they call couch grass there.
Yeah.
But it was just dried up and waiting for a rain.
So we're talking about
wasn't
a
growing.
relationship here.
Yeah, well, this plant had these slugs living in its leaf whorl and feeding on its decayed material, and in turn feeding it.
Symbiosis.
Oh yeah, it was like a happy marriage. And
In this little realm
yeah,
of
just
water.
just
from
right over.
dew.
Yeah, well, you could see. You know how snails and slugs will leave a sort of a slime trail?
Yeah.
And it'll dry up and it'll glisten and you can see it. Well, I was watching, and every one of these plants that was doing so well had these little slime trails out there around it, where the slugs had gone out at night and drunk the dew and come back and peed on the plant.
Used what they needed and brought the plant.
Oh, yeah, well, the plant had plenty of moisture. That was obvious. This
So,
was just harvesting dew.
so we're talking about using the 500 horn manure in the evening
Yep.
during that more peak exchange of, or that time of order when there's dew, right, or whatever, and then using the 501, the silica, to encourage order on that part of the day. Is that right?
Well, we go back to the fundamental nature of, the chemistry of things on the vertical axis is carbon and silicon, but on the horizontal axis is calcium and nitrogen. And it's not just calcium, it's every cation. It's aluminum. It's, it's a lot of different metallic elements, basically.
Okay.
When it gets into enzyme processes, then you get into the transition metals that we recognize as metals. But calcium is a
And then
metal.
gold, silver, copper.
Oh, yeah, all that.
But you're saying these others are metals as well.
Yeah, calcium and magnesium are metals.
That's right.
Potassium and sodium are metals.
Okay, so how's that apply to what we're doing?
Well, they are about 2% of our body chemistry. But they provide, you might say, the anchor, the weight of the body. Like, for instance, your bone cells, everyone's bone cells are hexagonal crystals filled with calcium. So bone cells are actually living silica cells. And depending on how you look at it, a chemist might say that that's amorphous fluid silica.
So silica is kind of a highway. Can you say that?
It forms the connective tissue, though, the cell walls.
Mm-hmm.
So a bone cell, its cell walls are really pretty rich in silica, enough to where it gets that hexagonal crystal shape. Bone cells are hexagonal crystals.
And this is the transfer of substances and forces too, or?
Yeah, well, you've got a concentration of both forces, see? Both of the activity of silicon and the activity of calcium and magnesium, but primarily calcium. So you might say the silica is holding the calcium and the magnesium in the bones.
Okay. Bring this into...
Well, the most effective medication for osteoporosis is a silica treatment, which makes perfect sense in the chemistry of the bone cells.
Mm-hmm.
That without having a strong enough silica patterning, then it doesn't hold the calcium in the bones anymore.
So what's lacking in the atmosphere to bring moisture is that silica organization, or the organization of the silica?
The organization of silica is really at work in the atmosphere with warmth and light. Now, warmth and light are these forces that we see in the atmosphere. If you check it out, then the warmth is coming off the pavement. It's coming off of bare soil. It's coming off of bare rocks. That's where it's hot. It's hot in the summer on the hood of your pickup truck. It could have been sitting there all day, but it's hot because the warmth is moving upward from wherever the sun hit the surface of the earth. So if you were a bird like a buzzard or that flew on those rising
The thermals.
thermals.
The thermals?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where the moisture goes, is it goes up those rising thermals. So any evaporation off of an area is going to go up those, you might say, vents into a cooler upper layer of the atmosphere.
Would you consider that disorder?
No, that's the origin of order.
That's the beginning of order.
That's where the
beginning of order.
where the order like enters into our world.
Okay.
So that's organizing moisture in the atmosphere by sucking the moisture up this warm, like column or vent
And that,
in the atmosphere.
and silica's in that. Encourage-
Silica may be in there. Silica is the finest dust in the atmosphere.
So wait, when we spray the silica Pratt, the horn silica, are we encouraging that order in that way?
Well, yes. More than I think that is clearly realized. But maybe we have to find better ways of measuring it too.
Oh.
But the organization that we produce by taking something that spent the whole summer in a cow's horn, buried in a prominent place where warmth and light are rich. Just as in my picture here is a sort of a prominent spot with red clay soil, and those horns there in the bottom on that left-hand side are full of horn silica. And to bury them in that kind of place and to have that warmth and light that are rising up from the earth into the atmosphere, that these horns are resonating in that field of energy. And this aligns the molecules, I have no doubt, of the silica crystals, these tiny silica particles that have been ground up and placed in these horns.
And put into a water.
Yeah, you have to moisten it to get it into the horn and whatever.
And to get it into the atmosphere too.
Well, if you then take a small amount of that and stir it up in water and impart its patterning to the water and spray the water, then the early morning time is the best time to do this in the summer. But in the winter, what we don't realize is the warmth and light have receded into the earth. So we've actually got warmth and light enriching the soil at that time of year. So the warmth and light join up with the chemistry and the life of the soil. And what happens, especially in fertile soils, is the life of the soil is what we call the soil food web.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's an interaction of a wide array of different kinds of organisms.
So this gives us a concentrated substance that we can focus at different other times of the year to encourage certain therapies or certain bring in things into balance that are out of balance.
I reckon since the warmth and light are working within the earth in the winter, that we should be spraying the horn silica on the earth in winter and let its influences work into the earth along with the warmth and light. So in autumn, I would be out there with the leaf fall, spraying my horn manure and my horn silica together,
Yeah.
along with horn clay.
And so with the idea of encouraging flows or creating order to encourage rain and or dew or some kind of atmospheric moisture to fall on your farm, you would do sequential spraying is what you call it. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I did. And I thought, why shouldn't I just do that every day? So I kept a log and started early in the year, maybe in January, and every morning when I got up before breakfast, then I set up a radionic treatment.
With 501.
With horn silica or the horsetail decoction.
Okay. The silica gesture, we might call it.
Yeah.
Okay.
The horsetail is a lot milder. It's not as seasonal as the horn silica.
Well, it's a whole plant,
Yeah.
not a concentrated mineral.
Yeah, it's a decoction of that herb.
Okay.
But
So you do that in the morning.
so I'd do one of those in the morning,
and then,
alternate mornings, and in the evening I would do the horn manure and the barrel compost. And so I'd alternate them. So as a sequential spray, I didn't actually spray, I just took the map of my farm and did this radionically.
and so you did that each day for a certain amount of time, also in another rhythm you mentioned. You mentioned the moon being in a particular relationship.
Yeah, I just kept a log that told me when these things were, and I could look at an ephemeris and see where the moon was, even if I wasn't taking note of it.
Yeah.
But because I had the time and place, then I could go back and translate to that and see what the position of the moon had been in any of these instances.
So at first you're just doing it to understand when it was most effective, right?
Yeah, well, just to get a sense of, what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't experiment, well, then what are you going to find out?
Of course. Yeah.
So it wasn't a particularly structured experiment, except I simply kept a log.
Yeah. And then out of that, you
Yeah.
were able to determine that somewhere around a full moon, or with the moon in a particular rhythm, was most effective. Is that right?
It always rains more right around full moon, and rains the least at new moon.
Okay. So that
that's a monthly cycle, and it's another sign that these etheric flows that biodynamics
harvest.
Yeah, there's not as much understanding as I'd like to see out there.
Yeah.
But biodynamics is at least a way of getting your head around these things and actually working with them. Because when you have the flow going this way, then you want to go with the flow.
Yeah.
That's going to be the easiest and best and most efficient and the best results and everything.
What I'd like to emphasize for folks watching this is that you've been able to venture into all these different scientific fields and ways of looking at things. And not everybody can do that. Hugh, I'm sorry. But what they can do is try these things on a more base level maybe, and see if they work for them. And at the ranch we make all the preparations.
Sure.
But not everybody even has to do that to try this, because we've done our homework and you've done your homework. And what I like about what you've done is bring it in and through the sciences to explain these phenomena, and that they do, in fact, work. Well, we know that because we're using it. I don't understand what you understand. I can't put together, that's why you're here, sharing this. But I want people to understand that they maybe first need to let go of maybe how they've been schooled a little bit to just try some of these things. And they can find the preparations from us or from other places. And you can go to Biodynamic Source, which is our company with Lloyd Nelson, and you can buy these things that we've made. And just like you go to the co-op and buy a chemical, you can come to us or JPI in Virginia or these other groups that make the preparations, and we have instructions, and you can just try them and see like you said, it's an experiment. And at first you shaking your own head about, well, I'm going to stir this, and you might think it's fairy dust, but there is a science behind it, and there is it works or it doesn't, and you need to figure that out personally.
Well, basically, you have to give it a good try, because unless you're really cluey to begin with, you probably don't know what your land needs.
Yeah, good point.
And to find out what your land is telling you it needs may take you many years.
Yeah. I mean, we're 16 years on our place, and we started, like I said, to make these more physical and horizontal moves of good sound organic, this and that, and rotating the cattle and doing all these things that I can, knock on wood and understand. And then we began to know that wasn't enough. We were bringing things out of degradation, but we weren't really kicking the whole thing off. And then as soon as we started to let go and try these other things, biodynamics and other things, and begin to learn this new language, I'll call it a meta language, and begin to diagnose the imbalances or balances, we could begin to articulate these therapies, these preparations in certain times, and we began to see the life just take off. And so what we've been doing here the last, I don't know how many hours now, is talking about the science behind and the I guess behind these things, and that it isn't spacey and it isn't spooky, and it is something that has a sound scientific basis behind it. And
right, but I hope people don't misunderstand that biodynamics is not a true believer system.
No, it either works or it doesn't work.
Yeah, we use it because it works, and we use it and a whole lot of other things besides that work.
That's right. And it's not a silver bullet either.
Oh no,
that's where you're going, I think.
No, but no, you still have to put up a good fence if you want a fence.
That's right.
You still have to put your hay in the barn if you want good hay.
We need good physical horizontal structures and methods, but on top of that, we can bring in the vertical, so to speak, and kick things off on a whole different level.
The imagination, this was the whole idea in biodynamics. Ehrenfried Pfeiffer, on a ride with Rudolf Steiner, who spent a lot of time on trains, he asked him, he said, why is it that people show so little evidence of spiritual progress despite all your efforts? And Steiner surprised him. He said, this is a problem of nutrition, that foods available today do not have the forces necessary to build a bridge between the will and the imagination.
So, in other words, the food that's available to us today is not triggering in us the full potential of our perception, the perception we could have, and the understanding we could have. And so we're kind of being dumbed down by dumb food, in a way. There's the lack of intelligence in the system. It translates to a lack of intelligence in us. Could you say that?
Well, I could, but then you have to acknowledge that the heart is one of the most massive nerve centers in our body.
Okay.
And just think, what is it that connects our will and our imagination? Between our guts and our head is our heart.
Yeah.
And our agriculture today doesn't have a heart. It's heartless. It is the most murderous, poisonous kind of thing.
This is a separation. You might take back to Descartes and Bacon and even Galileo, I guess, in the beginning of science, when we separated fact and fiction, and we separated myth from what became science. Before, they were interwoven, and there was a kind of a beautiful synergy there.
Yeah, and alchemy looked at things from a viewpoint of seeing unseen.
The whole.
Yeah, it was a holistic approach. But chemistry just looked at the physical substance.
It's Steiner, who actually, one of my favorite quotes of his, is that chemistry is the corpse. Chemistry is the corpse of alchemy.
Yeah, well, that's probably as good a description as you need.
In other words, we took alchemy, which was this whole idea and understanding of things, and we went chemistry, biology, right? And we divided everything up. And chemistry is just a part of what alchemy used to consider.
Well, then you start to think about such things as the biochemistry of the soil.
Yeah.
And it's bloody complex. We don't really have a characterization of the molecular structure of humic acid. What are the common features that make it effective humic acid? We really have not got a characterization of that.
Well, that's because we keep subdividing it and dividing it and trying to understand it instead of...
Yeah, well, we can't...
It's messy, isn't it? It's a messy vitality.
Yeah, well, that's it.
Yeah.
Because if we characterize a molecular structure, it's no longer alive.
To kill it. We turn it into a noun instead of a verb.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's exactly right. It becomes substance rather than an activity.
A living thing, a phenomenon.
Yeah, well, it's, process, dynamics.
Yeah, there's the dynamics.
There's fourth dimension to things.
Yeah. How can we wrap this up?
Well, I don't know. Rainmaking is simple, see, when you realize that you can it's like pumping the organization over your farm up like you were, on a swing set.
In the evening and in the morning with those two preps.
Right. You get to start off, you back up as far as you can on your tippy toes, and you jump off backwards and pull on the chains and go down as fast as you can to see how high you can go on the upswing. And at the upswing, you pull those chains again to get a little bit higher and to go faster on the downswing so that you know it. And it's like building up the organization in your locality, just like building yourself up on a swing set.
You know, we do this
I think
work.
you'll stop before you go over the top.
Yeah. We do this work and things happen. It can rain on our place and not on anywhere around us. Now, people stop by and say certain things, how they feel, and we get remarks, other forms of data like flavor and other things. And so I just write things down. I'm not about to say, well, that's because of this or that's because of that. But there's coincidence.
Yeah, well, there's a little...
Then there's coincidence.
Yeah, well, there's a little bit more than that, you know?
Well,
The story of the lucky farmer is he knows how to make his luck.
he knows how to organize things.
Yeah, now organizational energy flows from lower concentration to higher concentration. If it didn't, it wouldn't be organizational. So you can count on it. The disorganizational energy is flowing into dispersion and waste and whatever.
Yep.
But the organizational energy is flowing in the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm.
So
and
if you have
that's what your neighbor calls luck.
Yeah, because then if it's going to get organized, then it's going to flow to your place because it's the most organized place, and its organization is going to build in the most organized place.
I can tell you this, that in the last, especially 5, 6, 7, 8 years, we've watched more and diverse insect populations coming in. And I don't mean infestations, I just mean they're in balance, they're there, but things we've never seen before. There's more diversity of plant life, and there's more birds and that kind of life coming in.
And if you
it's like we created a sanctuary, and they don't like it out there necessarily because it's being poisoned. I don't know what, but it is this attraction of order.
Well, you get to the point to where when you cut your hay, there were grasshoppers everywhere and fed the trout in the creek.
Yeah.
And you had an ecosystem that was really rich.
Well,
because if that grasshopper went in the creek and there wasn't any trout there, then it just washes down, you know, where's it going? It's going
to the ocean.
Yeah, it's going to the ocean, going to Baja California or something.
Yeah. So we've encouraged on the place some kind of dynamic attraction.
Yeah, and that is itself a powerful attraction.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I've self-funded the soil test I have through these years, because those who have trouble with what we're doing and how we're getting the flavor and
but you know what we really need to mention is the bison soil activator
that we've made up. Yeah. Okay.
That really needs to be mentioned.
All right.
Because these biodynamic preparations are like each of them is a different instrument in the orchestra.
Okay.
So some are in the strings, and some are in the brass and the woodwinds and timpani
percussion
and so forth.
Yeah.
So you've really got a complement of different, say, organs. You know, organs are organized.
Yeah, right.
You've got a system of organs playing in your farm, and they're interacting. The liver and the kidneys are interacting.
This is the foundation of
of a biodynamic farm.
Which is
It's a living organism. see?
whole farm individuality is what Steiner called that.
Yeah, and it needs to have these organs. It needs its lungs, and it needs its heart, and it needs its central nervous system, and its sex organs, and all the rest of this.
So let's do quick. What would be the correspondence there? Soil would be what in the human organism? How would you call that? Is that the lungs or is that the liver? What is it?
No, it has to be organized into that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's part of it.
So what about the cows? Are they? Can we do that kind of direct correspondence?
Cows, look,
Their digestion. Aren't
look.
they?
If you could imagine the farm organism as if it was you,
Yep.
but buried up to your diaphragm in the soil.
My head in the
And
ground.
everything, yeah, your head underground, all your sense organs underground, except your feeling out here.
Okay.
And, yeah, you'd be listening to the music in the soil.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like chemistry is music. And
Yeah.
there's always a chemistry going on in the soil if there's any moisture whatsoever. And you'd be listening to that.
So have you ever put
Yeah,
those together? Like
You're like the organism has to breathe from its mouth underground,
yeah.
but its lungs, its counterpart to the combustion activity of you as a animal. It's dealing with the chemistry and photosynthesis in the leaf that's building all of this complex chemistry. So that's the leaves are the meat and potatoes of the plant, so to speak. So,
Okay. So
but see your guts, it would be above the diaphragm. Your kidneys would be above the diaphragm. Your liver would be below the diaphragm.
Mm-hmm.
Your lungs would be below the diaphragm.
So soil is lungs.
Yeah.
I'm trying to.
And when Rudolf Steiner mentioned in his agriculture course that legumes are the lungs of the soil, it shows you their importance because they bring oxygen into the soil. Everyone talks about legumes as though they fix nitrogen,
Yeah.
but they don't. Sorry, folks.
Well, not
It's
alone anyway.
That's right. They're great hosts for certain kinds of nitrogen-fixing bacteria called rhizobia. And those rhizobia may form nodules on their roots, and this is something they love. But basically what the legume is doing is it's drawing oxygen into the soil and excreting it around its roots
To feed
as
those,
oxalic acid.
to feed those microbes.
Well, it unlocks the calcium and magnesium and other cations in the soil.
Makes them available.
So it makes all of that, metallic cation complex in the soil available. And since aluminum is a +3 and it reacts with silicon to form clay, then aluminum is not really available to the plant as a cation.
So you brought up the orchestra, and you brought up the
Yeah.
buffalo soil activator and field spray that we're making.
So now you take all of your preparations together as a complex
Right.
and do this with bison manure, since that was the animal that built the fertility in these soils
In North America.
Yeah, in North America.
Yeah.
So sounds like a good choice to me anyway.
Okay. But what excites you about this
Well, you had me checking these out with my pendulum to
Yeah.
see whether
Their
I thought
vitality.
they had a good response, and without seeing the label or anything. And so I doused many different preparations.
That's right.
And when I got to that one, I got such a swing with my pendulum, I called it a helicopter,
Which would be
which would have been, I was good excitement over that one.
okay. But what is it about that you think is beneficial? And
Well, it's all of the instruments in the orchestra playing in concert.
so when we put that in water and put it
Yeah.
out on the land,
I think it's
we're
just
tuning everything up.
yeah. Water is the medium for sound, just incidentally for chemistry, and it's got a great memory for patterns, and it's just what a medium to spread these patterns of these things in the horns. But the bison soil activator, as I understand it, it's a bison manure compost that is impregnated with each of these preparations.
And then some.
And horn clay and so forth, esophageal clay.
Yep.
So that every organ of the farm is part of that pattern. Every, you might say, musical instrument is part of that concert.
And so when we use that,
Well, then all of the patterns in nature start to hum.
Okay.
Then you really start to get a flow of etheric energy, organizational energy.
We're getting good reports back from people using it. I'd like to give you some to take home and play with.
I'd love to have
too.
some,
Yeah.
Even though I live in a forest,
That's all right.
I guess,
You're
present
still
day
in North
bison.
America, aren't you?
oh yeah.
Weren't there bison down there?
Oh, it woods bison.
Sure. They ran over the whole place.
Yeah, they were a pretty important animal, actually.
Let's
They
try to put a wrap on this. I want to again promote your book, Quantum Agriculture, Biodynamics and Beyond by Hugh Lovell. And what's your earlier book was called What Is?
it was entitled A Biodynamic Farm,
Okay.
not to indicate it was the quintessential biodynamic farm,
Just
like the biodynamic farm.
An example.
But just a biodynamic farm.
And that's how you learned and went through different stages of implementing this as a
Oh, sure.
stewardship practice.
Oh, I started out making the worst of mistakes.
Like raw
Yeah.
manure for one.
Oh, raw manure was a real bad mistake.
But Hugh, they can find you on the internet. Is it quantumagriculture.com?
Yeah.
or-
It's www.quantumagriculture.com.
Okay.
And so we sell this book. It's also on Amazon,
Okay.
but we ship it. So
But also you consult. And I don't know that you're looking for more work, but
not really, but but I'm curious to see what shows up, because my approach is I try to meet needs, and if it's needed, then I'll try to do it.
okay. They can find you there. That's the best source there on the internet
Yeah, on the internet.
and through that website.
Yeah, and
And email you or
you'll get my wife's email.
Okay.
And she'll forward things to me.
all right. And
Seems like she didn't forward your
that's okay.
communication with her in the past, so I didn't know.
probably
I
protecting
didn't know
you.
you had tried to communicate.
She was probably protecting you.
Who
You got a
knows?
lot going.
Yeah.
But and then also Hugh brought up the buffalo soil activator and field spray, which we
Yeah.
make here. And
I can't think of a better way to get into biodynamics.
to start, yeah.
Yeah, I think if you are starting with a new property or starting anew with the property, then it would be the way to start. you just get everything. You know, you've got the full engine, has everything that belongs there.
Thank you for that recommendation. We and folks can find that at biodynamicsource.org. We make it right here in Carbondale at Sustainable Settings Ranch. And if you want to look at our programs there, sustainablesettings.org. And I should put a little plug in too. We've started medicinal herbs, which are, the apothecaries are saying, are 3-4 times the potency in the expression of the aromatics and the oils, healing oils. But that's biodynamic botanicals, and so you can find us there. And I think we'll call that a show. Thanks for coming.
Okay.
It's been incredible.
Make sure you use that steam nettle preparation on your medicinal herbs.
All right, we will try it.
Because that will ensure that they're top of the potential.
Okay. Thank you, Grassroots, for hosting, and we'll see you next time.
This program is underwritten by Sustainable Settings, a nonprofit organization devoted to harvesting nature's intelligence in its research and demonstration of sustainable human settlement. Sustainable Settings is supported by volunteering, the sale of our organic farm products, and your tax-deductible donation. Call 970-963-6107 and visit us on the web at www.sustainablesettings.org. This program is underwritten by Sustainable Settings, a nonprofit organization devoted to harvesting nature's intelligence in its research and demonstration of sustainable human settlement. Sustainable Settings is supported by volunteering, the sale of our organic farm products, and your tax-deductible donation. Call 970-963-6107 and visit us on the web at www.sustainablesettings.org.
Welcome to Grassroots TV. This is Brooke Levan. Our show is called Sustainable Solutions, where we interview practical visionaries. And we have with us today Hugh Lovell, who's the author of Quantum Agriculture, Biodynamics and Beyond. And this is our second show with him, but Hugh is a biodynamic farmer and a multidisciplinary scientist and teacher of soil science, biodynamics, and of course he travels the world as a consultant to help people recognize and to implement methods that honor the life that we co-create with to create our food and health in our systems and in ourselves. Welcome, Hugh, and great to have you here.
Yeah, well, it's an honor to be here.
Yeah. So, the previous episode we got into your history and studies of not everything, but a bit of the diversity that you have embraced in many fields. And this next half hour or so, I'd like to focus on biodynamics and how it works.
Well, I think we have to understand that there's two different sides to the psychology of being a human. You've got left brain and right brain. And left brain is analytical, but right brain is holistic. So right brain puts things together and sees them as wholes.
Synergistic?
It sees the synergy in nature.
Yeah.
it just grasps that intuitively, because it's the left brain that reasons it out.
Mm-hmm.
So the right brain just perceives it, sees it as it is, but can't explain why it is. You know, doesn't have it strung out in a sequence of different parts that you put together. You know, it's seeing the diesel engine work.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have any idea whether the injector pump or the oil pump or anything else is even in there.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were building a diesel engine, then you'd have to have the specifications on every part. And it would have to work together as a whole.
But there's still, even in that, the seen and the unseen.
Well, that's right. And we kind of ignore that. But quantum physics changed the perception of science by virtue of the fact that it proved unequivocally that the presence of the observer and his or her measuring instruments was a determining factor in the field of investigation.
Actually, my observation of an experiment affected the experiment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can that be translated to we kind of help create our own reality?
Well, that's exactly where that goes. You know, we're creating the realities we inhabit.
So when I'm in the field as a farmer,
Yep.
vegetables, or I'm working with my herd of milk cows, my attitude or my intention actually matters.
Oh, yeah, enormously. Because here's the rule of thumb. Manage for what you want. Don't try to manage what you don't want. Because where the attention goes, the energy flows.
Right on.
So you put your intention on what you don't want, and the energy will flow there.
Right.
And you will get, without any relief, you will get what you don't want.
So we are kind of tools, in a way. We are conduits. You're explaining something here that I know I work with on the land and with the life that I collaborate with. But how do you explain we are pretty amazing creatures?
Yeah, but
Our will.
from the viewpoint of physics, everything is vibratory.
Okay.
Okay? So you can look for the wave behavior of the phenomenon, and that's what you will see.
And that's what we affect.
Well,
Or
it's possible to affect it, yes.
okay.
But we can look for the particle behavior if we so choose. So in taking a soil test, I'm looking for the particle behavior. I have no idea about the wave behavior.
Mm-hmm.
The more I take it apart to look at how much phosphorus or calcium or whatever it might be is in the soil and measure that, the less I know about what's going on with those things. Because the amount of phosphorus in an earthworm in the soil it's not that awful much compared to the expanse of soil. Now the earthworm has collected this as a living organism, and this is what one of the great quantum physicists pointed out in his biophysics lectures. Erwin Schrödinger in 1948 pointed out that living organisms have the remarkable ability to concentrate a stream of order on themselves, and thus to apparently violate the second law of thermodynamics.
Which is?
which is that everything in the universe is running down to chaos. And that energy, however we might have concentrated it and been able to use it, that it bleeds away and becomes unavailable.
And so the life force counters that. Is that what you're saying?
Living organisms have the remarkable ability to concentrate a stream of order on themselves.
Why doesn't a carrot growing rot in the soil?
Yeah, why doesn't it break down? What's this business that it grows and it could attain great size and make a whole bunch of seeds and spread the chemistry of its aroma? It's just got a great aroma, and spread that all around. And
whereas I can put a stick in the ground and it'll rot. It'll degrade to that law, according to that law.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's not a living organism.
Right. That's right.
So if
life.
It's a living organism, then it has this ability to concentrate a stream of order on itself. Now that's quantum physics.
That's key right there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, how does it do this? What's going on? What are the principles involved?
So would you say that the biodynamic preparations, which people don't know what that is, should talk about, but that they're made up of different flowers and they're made up of different substances and forces that help create order? Would you say that right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so they help organize.
Yeah, complexity
Yeah.
is a measure of vitality in a living organism.
Mm-hmm.
So that complexity, and we don't even know how to measure it really all that well, but there are methods of measuring the complexity of things, and it's another way of putting it is measuring their general vitality.
Do you have any images that you brought that might guide the viewers through?
Boy, I've got lots of images.
Well, I just wondered if you wanted to share some of that.
Let's take a look through some of these slides here. This is a PowerPoint presentation, and these are two of the books that I have authored. And this is making three of the most fundamental biodynamic preparations. Now, up here in the upper left corner is the burial of cow horns that have been filled with cow manure from a lactating cow and put in a pit in an area where there was good soil and covered up from the end of September all the way through April, basically. And that horn manure then is taken out, and usually I think most people screen it and store it and use this a sort of a mild handful to treat a whole acre of soil to improve its fertility and its life.
We still call it horn manure even when it comes out, but it has been transformed.
Oh,
It's been composted, but it's been what? It's not green manure anymore.
Oh, no.
Okay, but we still call it that.
No.
The viewers don't know
But
that.
if you analyzed its protein content, it would have gone up.
Okay.
If you analyzed several of its components, then there will be some nitrate in it, but there will be some very complex carbon molecules that have incorporated nitrogen compounds into their molecular structure.
So it is a transformed substance at this point.
Oh, yeah. See, it's sat in that horn. If you held a horn up to your ear, you'd hear it resonating. And it does that in the soil, and it's absorbing then from, see, a cow's horn is actually, anatomically, it's reflecting the cow's energy back into the cow's system. And there's a major artery in the horn. It's major. If you ever dehorn cattle, you saw off that horn and it squirts blood in great big gouts all over you.
Yeah.
It's a really bloody operation to dehorn mature cows.
This sounds to me like the horn is another kind of rumination. You said it sends it back in.
Yeah, see.
Like cud and chewing cud. Is there any...
Yeah, well, the cow's just got all the best digestive factors that, that the cosmic imagination ever came up with.
It's remarkable, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is
But now consider
yeah.
the nervous development of animals from the time of the amoebas and paramecia and so forth, that they have been ingesting their food and developing sensory capability. Now that implies that digestion, which is your basic animal activity, is what makes you an animal, is that you can move around and pick and choose what you eat. And every animal does that. So the nervous development, the sensory development in animals parallels their digestive capacity, what they can do with their digestive processes. And you watch cows and they are so smart about what they sniff and smell and decide to eat. They are real smart about it. They know much more than people know about these things.
So we have this horn manure, we call it, and it's got a number, 500.
Yeah,
and so
that's sort of just a shorthand.
We talk about polarities, and so that's one of the main polarities.
That's the animal polarity, see?
More earthly.
More digestive.
Okay.
More intelligent. On the other hand, see, digestion is a transformative process.
Mm-hmm.
But there has to be a formative process occur before you can have a transformative process. So animals eat plants.
Yeah.
Okay? And so what can plants do? And so that's the other side of nature. What's happening in our summer growth of plants here in Aspen, Colorado. You know, what happens in that summer season and what's going on with the different substances in nature. Because if we perceive the vibratory side of nature, which is all around us, everything is vibrating. You know, your body is vibrating. The chair you're sitting in vibrates.
Right. Everything's alive.
Everything is alive. Everything is in a wave behavior. Now that wave behavior is localized in your physical body.
Yep.
It's localized in the tree outside. It's localized in the building we're in and all the rest of these things. But quantum physics tells us more than that. Sure, it can be local and you can treat it as a particle, and it's a great way to do it. But you have to understand time, you have to have process, you have to have activity.
That's the wave?
And that's the wave.
Yeah.
There is no wave without a time.
Yeah.
And so processes take time. They're fourth dimensional. So if we learn to live in the vibrational world, which we live in, you know, you bump your head on something overhead, and you feel it.
Mm-hmm. So Steiner in the ag lecture said, we have to understand what is earthly and what is cosmic, is one way he puts it. So if we've got the earthly preparation that's bringing us fertility, the horn manure is fertility and quantity, right? You could say Mother Earth. We have, what's the opposite? What's the other pole?
Well, let's look at it.
Because we need both things to run the engine, right?
Let's look at this in mathematics.
Okay.
Because there's a vertical axis and there's a horizontal axis.
Okay.
And you look at the geology out here, the siliceous rocks, the granite and the quartz and whatnot have pushed up out here in these mountains, up through what was once a sedimentary layer.
So that
It used to be, when the Appalachians were the only mountains on the continent, that the sediments from the erosion of the Appalachians crossed this very area and ended up in Utah
as calcium.
as the minerals that eroded out of the Appalachians. And they have the isotopic signature of that distribution of isotopes that identifies their origin. So this area here was once a very shallow inland ocean.
Mm-hmm. And
Or
through
maybe
that
yeah.
came the Rockies.
Yeah, now see, in the development of the Earth, this is present day accepted scientific fact, that there was a time before the moon separated from the Earth. The moon has separated from the Earth
Steiner mentioned
at
that,
a
didn't he?
past period of the Earth's evolution.
Yeah.
Now, that's kind of a riddle for modern science to explain, but it's clear from the demonstrable facts of the isotopic distribution of elements in the moon and the moon rocks and the Earth's rocks, that the moon is the only other body in the solar system with the same composition as the Earth. So it's real clear. NASA doesn't talk about it any other way, really, that the moon once separated from the Earth. And undoubtedly, if that's so, it had to separate out of the Pacific, and the Atlantic split open, and the Earth's been spreading around the Pacific Rim ever since.
Something that, I'm doing all these soil tests and looking at all this data and I have for years, even before I switched to this other type of test that measured the life. But even when we were measuring just the elements, nitrogen and phosphorus, potassium, and these other things, silica was never on the map.
Well, it's definitely on the geologist's map, though.
Yeah.
So geologists know that volcanoes are spitting out siliceous ash and siliceous basalt. Volcanoes are famous for blowing out silica.
Well, there's silica in the air.
There's silica in the finest particles in the air. They're almost entirely silica.
So why is it that agriculture and agricultural sciences and all of those things don't talk about silica?
Well, back in the day of Liebig, where our present-day chemical agriculture got its start, then Liebig knew very well how to test for silica and tested plants for all of these elements, including silica. And there were times when the silica from specimens of plants that were in adjacent fields that this tested 8 or 10 times higher in silica than this one.
Mm-hmm.
And this happened with a number of different elements, iron and manganese and so on and so forth. So what Liebig was faced with was, how do I know whether this is absolutely essential or not? And his method was to exclude that element, copper or zinc or whatever, exclude it from the growing medium. So he could have his growing medium analyzed and show that he couldn't find that element in it. And then to see if the plants could grow in there and see what failed in the plant possibly, and might see how that element is essential. But with silica, this method was of no help at all, because you couldn't exclude silica from the growing medium.
On the drive up, you explained to me how silica, and I'm going to butcher this, you have to fix
Go
it now.
for it.
But it's a matter of cations and anions, and silica's part in that. Can you explain that?
Well, okay, in chemistry, your chemistry comes from the resonance or dissonance of certain elements in the presence of others.
This means positive and negative charge?
Positive and negative charge are the basis of all of your chemical reactions.
Okay.
So in chemistry, this is called oxidation reduction. And every chemical reaction has an equilibrium in the oxidation and reduction counter reaction. It's always a counter reaction. It's going both directions.
Okay. So,
But there's an equilibrium point that might be way over towards the end product, or might be rather close to the beginning product.
okay. So give me the two negative and positives, and then how does silica relate in there?
Well, the first anion, the first negatively charged element in the periodic table, is nitrogen. And so nitrogen is the most sensitive element. It's looking for 3 electrons to partner with.
Searching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of, I wouldn't put it that it's picky, particularly,
It's kind of hungry.
but it finds itself more inclined to form a bond with another nitrogen, and they each share 3 electrons. If it does that, that's really attractive to it, because it really, you know, other things are not as satisfying. It's like you held an image up to itself, and they were both front to front and mirrors of each other. It's like nitrogen is narcissistic.
That's what I was about to say, yeah. So we got that, nitrogen, and nitrogen's in the air.
Oh yeah, well, our air on this planet is roughly 78% nitrogen. And in the form it's in the air, it's pretty much of an inert gas. It's not like it can't react, and obviously, because every living organism in nature requires nitrogen in its chemistry, then it works just in nature,
Okay.
you know, nitrogen for living organisms.
There's an irony here that industrial agriculture is physically encouraging applying synthetic nitrogen when hovering over the fields of all farms is this 79% nitrogen, right?
Yeah, it is rather mind-boggling that our first priority in agricultural research has not been, at least not on a national basis, or international for that matter, that the first priority you would think would be finding out how nature gets nitrogen, all it needs, out of the atmosphere. It's just a huge abundance there. And it's the most abundant element on every farm.
Yeah, but we're ignoring it. Now,
Yeah,
this is where...
we've got our backs turned to the, you know, it's the Five of Pentacles card in the tarot.
The thing about this, I go to energy a little bit here, and the energy that we are looking for is all right here if we would just relax and let nature work. We are putting a tremendous amount of effort and mining and drilling and finding these external energy forces to create something that is really beautifully really right here.
Well, see, that's the beauty of these horn preparations.
Right.
Because that horn on the cow is reflecting the cow's ego back into the cow.
Okay.
And it's excreting those egoic factors in its manure. And this is why the cow is sacred in India. That growing our food with that cow in the cycle provides the digestive support for optimizing our brain and nervous system chemistry. That would do more to feeding the human will than anything else we could do. We don't know specifically what those factors are in the chemistry of the soil or in the chemistry of the cow or whatever, but we can trace the process that's going on there, and the cow is a far more intelligent eater than it is, you really see it in cows. They don't have an ego. They're not aware that they're aware. They're just aware. They're more than what they are. But that's something that people do that without even question, is they try to be more than what they are. They're aware of themselves.
Yeah. So wait a second now. We have the anions and nitrogen.
Yep.
And that's that molecule, right, that's calling for three what?
3 electrons. Partners. Yeah.
So then the opposite of that is a cation, which is?
Yeah, well...
Is that calcium? What is that?
Calcium has got 2 to share.
But it has extra, right?
Yeah, it would like to give those away, you know, say, here, I'll share this with you, you know, I'm not interested in it. I feel better if I, let you use it.
Right. So we have the one nitrogen looking for something, and we have the calcium wanting to give it away. Could we say this is kind of the engine of life, or am I going too far too fast?
Chemistry in the human body, for instance, at these temperatures and these conditions, then hydrogen bonding simply means that hydrogen can swap partners, because everything with an electron is its potential partner. It's associated with the electron shroud of the universe. So when you look at hydrogen's distribution, it's 98% of all the matter in the universe.